thank you for taking the time and making the effort to make your way here. I know it's not easy sometimes to unplug from our lives and make our way to a space like this to do this kind of work. So I honor whatever your road is that led you to this place this morning. So I like to begin with a meditation before we do anything else. Let's drop into the silence together. I invite you to find a comfortable position in your seat so that you can sit for about 15 minutes. Some of that will be guided, and some of it will be just resting in the silence. So take your time to get comfortable and to position yourselves. This is a feminine meditation, not a masculine meditation, meaning you don't need to beat the shit out of yourselves in order to get enlightened, right? That's the boy-shaped model that we're going to be subverting here today. So it starts with resting in meditation, taking refuge in the silence rather than using it as a bludgeon. Got it? Very important. That's your first lesson. I really want you to take that in. So I'm going to ring the bell and invite you to just kind of allow the sound. By the way, speaking of sound, can you hear me okay? Good. Allow the sound of the bell to carry you into the center of yourself, where you will take refuge for a few minutes. And then I'm going to read you a prayer that I wrote to the Shekhinah, the indwelling feminine presence of the divine, as perceived in the Jewish tradition. And today is the Shekhinah's day because it's Shabbat in the Jewish way, which is the day of Sabbath. So we're going to invoke her to help us navigate the holy land of this Sabbath day. And then I'll guide you into your body and into the silence, and then I will read you another poem to end. I invite you to begin by taking 3 deep, full breaths. Inhaling all the way, holding the inhalation for as long as you can, and then exhaling completely and holding the exhalation for as long as you can. So 3 deep, full, cleansing breaths at your own pace. Inhaling deeply, holding, exhaling completely, and holding. Take your time. Feel the way the breath washes every cell of your being. Allow yourself to become curious about the full arc of the breath, coming in and flowing back out. See if you can notice little micro nuances of the breath. Maybe the temperature of the in-breath versus the out-breath. Allow the breath to both relax and revitalize you. And whenever you finish taking your 3 deep breaths, simply allow yourself to breathe naturally, having become intimate with your breath, allowing it now to be the touchstone of your meditation when your mind wanders. Yes, breathing in, breathing out, so embodied. Not using your meditation to catapult you out of this world into some kind of altered state, but rather allowing yourself to more and more fully and completely show up right here, in this moment, in this room, in this pop-up community that is gathering today. Giving yourself permission to fully be right here. Nowhere else to be, nothing else to do right now. All the demands of your regular life grow quiet. A prayer to the Shekhinah. O Shekhinah, yours is the feminine face of the holy, the luminous moon who lights up the night as we travel from captivity to liberation, the pillar of fire who guides our way home, the cloud hovering over the mountain peaks, living sign that the drought is over. You are the indwelling presence of the divine. Whenever we gather to praise the One, you are here in our midst. When we cry out for justice, you make our hearts tender. When we stand with those on the margins, you make our legs strong. When we create works of art and parent our children and harvest our gardens, you guide and sustain us. You are the Sabbath bride, the beloved, returned from exile. You restore balance in our relationships and wholeness to our fragmented souls. You infuse our lovemaking with honey. You fill the cup of our hearts, which tremble with longing, with the wine of your answering love. You are the song of our homecoming. You are the Sabbath queen, the great mother, who sits at the heart of the table, tearing off hunks of the secret bread that contains the exact flavor each of us loves best. You feed us all, the proud and the repentant, the believer and the skeptic, from your own hands. Your unconditional forgiveness dissolves otherness. O Shekhinah, we are the vessel for your inflowing. Your radiance requires the clay of our embodiment. Your flame burns at the core of the earth. Your warmth penetrates the seedbed and animates the seedlings. You bless the head of every animal and kiss the tear-streaked face of humanity. You are the vision that builds community, and you are our refuge when the fabric of community unravels. Be with us now as we navigate this landscape of mystery, where your most cherished attributes, wild mercy and boundless compassion, righteousness and wisdom, seem to be cast aside and trampled by imperious world powers and we are paralyzed by helplessness. Help us. May we remember you and lift you up. May we recognize your face and celebrate your beauty in everything and everyone, everywhere, always. Amen. So breathing now into your body. Imagine there's a cord, roots of light that connect you from the base of your spine deep into the heart of Mother Earth. Feel the way you are entwined with her right now, just beneath the surface of this concrete is this living being, Gaia, the Mother, welcoming you home. Take root in her. At the same time, imagine a pillar of light that connects you from the crown of your head into the heavenly realms, the invisible realms, where the ones we cannot see necessarily gather with us and surround us and protect us and offer us insight and wisdom. Lifted from above, rooted from below, balanced in the middle, perfectly suspended between the heavens and the earth. Remembering that this land that we sit upon was stolen from the original people who lived here. Let us honor them now with gratitude for the opportunity to be in this beautiful space, knowing that it came at great cost to the ancestors of this land, this opportunity of ours, that we may not squander it, but rather with gratitude find the blessings, the cup of blessings that we may carry into the world. And now, held by the earth and supported by the invisible realms, let's take a few moments to rest in the stillness and take refuge. Annunciation by Marie Howe. Even if I don't see it again, nor ever feel it, I know it is, and that if once it hailed me, it ever does. And so it is myself I want to turn in that direction, not as toward a place, but it was a tilting within myself, as one turns a mirror to flash the light to where it isn't. I was blinded like that and swam in what shone at me, only able to endure it by being no one. And so specifically myself, I thought I'd die from being loved like that. Annunciation by by Marie Howe. Even if I don't see it again, nor ever feel it, I know it is, and that if once it hailed me, it ever does. And so, it is myself I want to turn in that direction, not as toward a place, but it was a tilting within myself, as one turns a mirror to flash the light to where it isn't. I was blinded like that, and swam in what shone at me, only able to endure it by being no one, and so specifically myself, I thought I'd die from being loved like that. Eye Mask by Denise Levertov. In this dark I rest, unready for the light which dawns day after day, eager to be shared. Black silk, shelter me. I need more of the night before I open eyes and heart to illumination. I must still grow in the dark like a root, not ready at all. Eye Mask by Denise Levertov. In this dark I rest, unready for the light which dawns day after day, eager to be shared. Black silk, shelter me. I need more of the night before I open eyes and heart to illumination. I must still grow in the dark like a root, not ready at all. Good morning. So I'm not so interested in the answers. I'm interested in abiding in this very alive, in-between, liminal space of mystery. We don't know what's going on particularly. Some of us think we might. And yet, it is actually in that emptiness that we can fully take root and experience the depth of our aliveness. So I'm inviting us into that space of mystery today. If you're thinking that you signed up for some answers, maybe they'll give you your money back and you can go. Because that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is really an enlivening of that open space of creative possibility in which the feminine lives and flourishes. So before I begin to really dive into the teachings, of course we already have, but giving you some more verbal teachings about the feminine mystics of different spiritual traditions, I'd like to invite you to take a moment to reflect on what it is that you aspire to receive from this gathering today. What your intentions may be, but really what your aspirations are. Why would you take the time and spend the money and find your way to this spot on this beautiful day to do this thing that you don't know what you're doing necessarily, but you might have your heart may have some desire. So reflect on that for a moment, and then I'm going to ask you to just collect into small groups of 3 triads, and wait in the quiet. I quietly collect in a moment, and then I will ring the bell and give each person around 2 minutes to share one by one with no commentary, no crosstalk, just be witnessed in sharing what your aspirations for this gathering today may be. If you are listening to this, watching this on your own later, you might gather right now a piece of paper or an electronic device and just do a free write in response to that question. What are my aspirations for gathering together in the name of this wild mercy that characterizes the feminine experience of spiritual awakening? Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. For those of you who are watching this later, it may not be Saturday, but for those of us in this space-time nexus today, it is the Jewish Sabbath day, Shabbat. And it's the holiest day in the Jewish tradition. You will see that I am going to be all over the spiritual map today, drawing from multiple traditions, lest you think you're getting a singular dose of Judaism. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, we'll see what she's in charge, by the way, so I have no idea. But I do have a little idea, but sometimes it doesn't go the way I plan. But this is a root tradition of mine, and it's also significant to me that we're gathering on this Sabbath day. This is one of the practices that I do integrate into my life. So I want to say that what I'm about to share with you is a takeaway. It's an actual practice that I encourage you to adapt to fit the shape of your own life, because it is an incredible resource, this Sabbath practice that we draw from the Jewish tradition, and it's available to anyone of any tradition and no tradition. There are some of us in this room that don't identify with any particular shape of religion or spirituality, but have a kind of open container, and it fits whatever comes to us, so that it's not a violation of any particular religious belief system, nor is it an imposition of a particular way of doing things. It's an invitation to simply keep the Sabbath holy in your own way. And I do that in my way, which is that on Friday when the sun goes down, I light candles, 2 candles, and welcome the Sabbath. And then we do a blessing over the candles, and then a blessing over a cup of wine, which we share, and then whoever we happens to be on any given Friday evening, and then a blessing over bread, and then we share the bread. And if we're gluten-free, we share rice crackers. I've been known to use airplane pretzels in a pinch. So I'm going to read a little invitation to keeping the Sabbath holy, and then we'll talk about this practice as a true spiritual practice. Here, come here. Take a moment to set aside that list you've been writing in fluorescent ink. The list that converts tasks to emergencies. Items like feed the orchids become, if I don't accomplish this by 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, the rainforests are going to dry up and it will be all my fault. Or, if I fail to renew my automobile insurance, I will probably crash my car and everyone will die. Or, this friend just had her breast biopsy, and that friend's brother-in-law beat up her sister, and my aunt just lost her job with the symphony, and my nephew is contemplating divorce, and I must call them all and listen to them for an hour each and dispense redemptive advice. Gather your burdens in a basket in your heart. Set them at the feet of the mother. Say, take this, great mama, because I cannot carry all this shit for another minute. And then crawl into her broad lap and nestle against her ample bosom and take a nap. When you wake, the basket will still be there, but half its contents will be gone, and the other half will have resumed their ordinary shapes and sizes, no longer masquerading as catastrophic, epic, chronic, and toxic. The mother will clear things out and tidy up. She will take your compulsions and transmute them, but only if you freely offer them to her. Does this sound familiar to anyone? This being overly busy, having the to-do list in fluorescent ink, the feeling that the world is going to blow up if you don't answer 20,000 emails by 9 o'clock. So that's what the Sabbath is built for, is that feeling of being driven by all of these compulsions, by the endless to-do list. Maybe you don't have that issue, but most people do. Most people do. And all of us probably do from time to time have that feeling of that it's too much and we're not enough. That feeling. And the Holy One in her infinite mercy knew that and suggested that we do some kind of ritual to remember that we're not in charge of the universe. That we do not have to, as Abraham Joshua Heschel, the great 20th century Jewish philosopher and activist, said, bend the universe to our will. He also said that the Sabbath is building a temple in time and then entering it. So it's a sacred space. It's a virtual sacred space. And we build it by lighting the candles or doing whatever invocational ritual we can that feels aligned with our own spiritual sensibilities to welcome the Sabbath. And in the Jewish tradition, the Sabbath is a being, and she is female. And her name is Shekhinah. And the Shekhinah is the divine in flowing into form. She is the indwelling feminine presence of God. Even if you don't like the G word, she is the sacred pouring into matter. In Judaism, it's said that the Shekhinah dwells in exile, except on Shabbat, when she comes home. And the feminine and masculine aspects of the Godhead come back into balance on Shabbat. That's why it's such a holy, holy day, and it happens every week. The holiest day in the Jewish tradition is not Rosh Hashanah in the fall or Yom Kippur, the New Year, the Day of Atonement, although those are deeply holy days. Any Jews in this group? Okay, so you may or may not be familiar with this. I wasn't growing up. It was only in my teens, actually, when I met Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi of blessed memory, that I learned about this mystical practice of the Sabbath. So deeply, powerfully holy, and it comes again and again every week, this holy, holy day. And it is a day of balance. It is a day of the reunification of the masculine and feminine, but with an overemphasis on the feminine, which is kind of what I'm up to. Overemphasizing the feminine. And sometimes people ask me, inevitably white dudes, I'm just saying, aren't you concerned, Mirabai, that they're going to find an imbalance in the other direction? No, I'm not. It's going to take a long time for that to happen. Yeah, I think you're safe, guys. Not only that, but would that hurt so much? An imbalance of these elements of wildness and mercy and creativity and fierce truth-telling? So this Sabbath practice is a way to take refuge, to restore, to revitalize, to rest, but also to show up in a really full, engaged way with the world as it is, rather than the world of our own making. That world that actually ends up becoming a source of pain and burden often, the world of our own making. Have you noticed? Is it just me that create these worlds that I have shaped to my own ideas, and then they kick me in the ass, actually, ultimately. So on the Sabbath, we're invited to take refuge in what is. And so I actually literally try to disengage from the particular compulsions that drive me during the week, one of which is my electronic devices. And the computer at all. I mean, I don't check email on Shabbat. If really, really pressed, I'll check it, but I won't answer it. Or if I'm really, really pressed, I might answer very briefly. But everyone who knows me knows that I really take Shabbat seriously. And so it's a day for me of not dealing with that fluorescent ink to-do list at all. Just letting it go. It's, Orthodox Jews might not drive a car or cook or do anything like that because it's considered to be labor, and that's sacrilegious. For me, Shabbat is not an injunction, it's an invitation. And this is the way that the feminine reclaims spirituality from the patriarchy. Thank you very much. We're taking it back. And that's why I spoke about meditation this morning, not as something we use to bludgeon ourselves, to beat ourselves into submission, into spiritual submission, but rather as an invitation to become fully present and to rest in the stillness and to drink from that wellspring like the deer thirsty for the living waters. Not because we're trying to flex our spiritual muscles and prove something through being the best meditator in the class. That's the way the boys taught us to do it. And when I speak of the masculine, I'm speaking of the feminine and the masculine in all of us. There are many of us who are women in this room, or people somewhere on the gender spectrum, who do not necessarily identify with what we might consider to be classic female attributes of meek and mild. I mean, you probably wouldn't be here if you were the meek and mild type. And there are men in this room, not as many as usual, but because I'm finding that men are really finding their way to this work because they are thirsty for this feminine wisdom, the women of the women mystics. But there are male beings who are much more closely aligned with some of the classic attributes of the feminine, of unconditional forgiveness and mercy and loving kindness. So I'm speaking about the masculine and feminine in all of us, in women, in men, in people of all genders. So please understand that. When I say that we are reclaiming the feminine across the religious landscape and the spiritual landscape, I mean that we are reframing some of these gorgeous and important spiritual teachings and practices from a perspective of, or through a lens of, loving kindness and fierce protectiveness of community, of a felt sense of our interbeing, knowing that we belong to each other. And that the way of awakening is not an individual project of salvation or liberation, but rather a collective call to wake up and to step up, to find the way that we connect and take our place in that web of interconnection, in our uniqueness, in our particularity. So it's a dual, non-dual project. The way of non-duality has become rather dualistic in the spiritual communities that I know about. It's like the non-dual way is the only way, and that any kind of devotional impulse is an artifact of your spiritual immaturity if you still think that God, for instance, is outside of yourself. It's said in the Advaita Vedanta tradition, the way of non-duality, that you are that, thou art that there is no separation between yourself and ultimate reality. And I believe that too. And it's not an intellectual concept. It's an experience of interbeing, which does not preclude people the devotional impulse to adore the beloved, to yearn for and long for the divine as beloved. That is not some evidence that you're still stuck in dualism. That yearning, that impulse, is the connection. That the non-dual experience is not a concept of there is no separation between self and God, for instance, but an actual taste of our belonging to her. You mind if I call her her today? Thank you. So I encourage you to consider, if you don't already do so, weaving in some kind of Sabbath practice into your life. So in Judaism, it begins, as I said, on sunset on Friday, lighting the candles. You can do a blessing of any kind to welcome the Shekhinah. That's what happens when you kindle the Sabbath lights. You're welcoming the Shekhinah, and she comes pouring in. And she infuses you with this additional spiritual resource with which to navigate the Holy Land of the Sabbath. You need her. It's not easy to rest with all the shit going on that you have to do. It takes a certain kind of spiritual discipline to say, yes, I'm going to lay down my burden today and allow myself to be. So the Shekhinah helps with that. She holds us. She fills us. It's said in Judaism that we're given a second soul on Shabbat, and that is the Shekhinah. Or we are resouled, sometimes it says in the mystical literature, we are resouled on Shabbat. And so for me, when the whole idea of labor is more about the shoulds, laying aside the shoulds and allowing myself to follow my heart and my body. So cooking, for instance, for my grandmother might have been a no-no on Shabbat. For me, that's a way to honor the Sabbath, is to gather my favorite ingredients and my favorite people and put them together and have a fiesta in the kitchen of cooking and serving each other beautiful food. That's something I don't allow myself to do during the regular week so much, is make a nice meal. So for me, cooking on Shabbat is the opposite of work. It's joy. I walk every day. I happen to live in northern New Mexico on the edge of national forest land, and I have two big, beautiful dogs, Lola and Ruby. And so we walk every day. But on Shabbat, I take a longer walk. I go to a place where I can walk and walk and walk and really be present on my walk. That's part of my Sabbath practice. I love poetry, as you may have noticed, both in the things that I've read to you, and for those of you who have read Wild Mercy know that my voice is on the lyrical side. On Shabbat, I read poetry, and I read poetry aloud to anyone who will listen. A beautiful practice is reading poetry to your lover in bed, Shabbat or not. Really powerful spiritual practice. So poetry becomes part of my Sabbath. There's so many delicious collections and anthologies of poetry out there. And to me, all poetry is mystical poetry if it's written from a place of truth and groundedness in the body. And so you'll notice that I draw from a lot of contemporary women poets who to me are the living mystics among us. Some of you are sitting right in this room. In fact, all of you have the strands of the feminine mystic in your heart and in your soul. It's not some rarefied state reserved for the spiritually elite. I really, really, really want to convey that. I think you already know that, or you wouldn't be here with the likes of me, unless you already know that we're all mystics and we're all prophets. And so our task is to rise to that call, to step up as the prophets that we are in these urgent times of brokenness, and to take refuge in the heart, which is the landscape of love, where we find our essential unity with the beloved. So the call is for both of those right now, and we all qualify. It's only the masculine paradigm that has tried to convince us that there's some kind of abstract state of perfection and purification to which we are meant to aspire, and without which we don't qualify for a life of mystical connection and prophetic response. If we wait for that, I don't even know where it came from, except it's some impulse to disembody and to distrust the feminine experience. But if we're waiting for some idea of purification and perfection and think that there's something wrong with with that, then we won't be able to get on with the urgent and joyful task of waking up and stepping up. Right? Do you agree? I see a lot of heads nodding. Yeah, I know I'm singing your song. I didn't make this up, by the way. This is a song that has been resounding for a long, long time, but has been buried very successfully and very intentionally by the religious structures that many of us have inherited. So, in a moment, I'm going to have us connect again and do a little bit of trialoguing. But first, I want to just give a little teaching that is about reclaiming the feminine. So in Judaism, the Shekhinah, as I said, lives in exile, comes back on Shabbat when we light the candles and welcome her, and bless the Kiddush cup, the cup of wine, which represents the heart that longs for God. And the wine is the answering response of that love that comes pouring in to the open container of our hearts when we call out to the beloved. And then we bless the bread, which is our connection to the earth, and to our bodies, and to each other's bodies. The highest mitzvah being both a commandment and a blessing in Judaism, mixed together, is to make love on Shabbat with your beloved. Yeah. It's the Maha Mitzvah, the greatest. I'm mixing Sanskrit and Hebrew, you don't mind, do you? The greatest blessing. And if you don't have a physical relationship, then you cultivate that love-making connection with the divine, or with the earth herself. So it's about embodiment. So somehow the rabbis decided that the Shekhinah went into exile with the Israelites when they were kicked out of the Holy Land. We don't really know. With Adam and Eve, when they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, as you can see, this is a narrative of being separated. And she went with us in our separation, in our exile, in our diaspora, our various diasporas, and we all have those moments in our lives when we're sent away. And she goes with us, and that's very nice, indeed. But my question, and this is very much a living question, is why does she need, she being the indwelling feminine presence of the divine, not, as my friend Eve Ilsen, the widow of Rabbi Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, says, she's not Mrs. God. The Shekhinah is the divine, the indwelling, the feminine presence of the Godhead. So why does she need to be separated, to abide out there in exile, only to return and reunify with the masculine who gets to be here all the time, you may have noticed, on the Sabbath? Why not reclaim her and welcome her home here in our bodies, in our lives, in our midst, in our communities, all the time, in our churches and our temples, our mosques, and our other holy, sacred spaces that don't have formal, institutionalized sanctions. Bring her home, reclaim her from exile. Now on Shabbat you will remember her more. And yet that doesn't mean that she has to get sent away again when the sun sets on Saturday. It's interesting, in Shabbat there's a ritual called Havdalah. Have you heard of this? It's on Saturday when the sun goes down. It's to end Shabbat. Some people don't do it, but some people do. And it involves inhaling from a box of fragrant spices, delicious like cinnamon and clove and those kinds of beautiful fragrant spices. And you do that so that you won't faint with sorrow that Shabbat is over. That's how sweet and delicious it is. It's a taste of ha'olam haba, the world to come. The world to come. Jews don't really believe in life after death. Did you know that? There's no real heaven, like you die and you go to heaven kind of thing, but there is a sense of this perfected space, and that is what we experience a taste of on Shabbat. So if it's so wonderful, why do we have to deprive ourselves of that? Because that's what we were taught, to live in deprivation. But Shabbat is about living in abundance and then carrying that sweetness infused into every cell of our bodies into our lives for the rest of the week. Carry the Shekhinah with us. So before we gather into our triads, I want to reclaim another teaching besides the Shabbat teaching that you can find a way to do, even if it's not Friday night to Saturday night, but maybe another day of the week or a half a day or a day a month or a weekend a month. Oh my God, could you imagine? You know, when I began to practice this, I was a young single mother with two difficult girls, I have to say. Anyone else have difficult children? I mean, they weren't always difficult, but, you know, challenging. And I was working like 3 jobs. I was doing it on my own, although I have a great mom, and, you know, she was really helpful, but still is. But it was difficult, and I thought, there's no way I can afford to take a day a week to unplug. I'm way too busy. Important to do that. And so when I did invite myself to do this practice, engage in this practice, it was like the universe miraculously expanded to accommodate my Shabbat practice. And the sky didn't fall, and it continues. I mean, I've gotten even busier over the decades since I started this, and yet on Shabbat, it's like the world takes a breath and lets me breathe. And I'm able to show up, and in being fully present for that sacred day of cooking and walking and eating and lovemaking and poetry and rest, napping, I am able to really be present to the rest of my life in ways that I can't even imagine being now without it. So it's that powerful. So however you can integrate it, I invite you to be brave enough to do it. Does anyone in here have some kind of Sabbath practice already? Oh no. Oh. Okay. So please, you can borrow mine. I give very detailed instructions in Wild Mercy. And it's in chapter 2. That's how important it is to me. It's right there near the beginning. So now, briefly, in Buddhism, there is a prayer. It's actually a vow, the refuge prayer, or the refuge vow. And you take refuge in the 3 jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Now, in Judaism, I talked about the word mitzvah. A mitzvah, the plural is mitzvot, and there are 613 of them in the Torah. It's a very demanding, bossy religion. The word mitzvah is both an imperative or an injunction or even a commandment, is often the way that's translated, and an invitation and a blessing at the same time. So, for instance, to feed the hungry is a mitzvah, but it's also, of course, a blessing. Who has not fed a hungry person and felt fed? Right? That's what a mitzvah is. In Buddhism, the refuge vow is both a promise and an invitation to take refuge. But what I've noticed is that the dudes often forget the taking refuge part of the refuge vow. That is resting in, finding safety and sanctuary in taking refuge in the Buddha, taking refuge in the Dharma, taking refuge in the Sangha. So let us reclaim that right now, this minute, in a feminine way. So to take refuge in the Buddha traditionally means to look to the life of Siddhartha Gautama, the guy known as the awakened one, and see what his life was like and see if we can emulate it in some way. Like this is an illuminated version of a perfected person. Look at his life, what we know of it, and see if we can aspire to live that way with loving kindness and wisdom. So I'm inviting us to take refuge, because this is the triple gem or the 3 jewels of Buddhism, to take refuge not only in Siddhartha Gautama, the life of that man, but look to the women exemplars across the spiritual landscape, and in both long gone and living right now. And they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and disguises. Look to the women who light our way with their lives, with their example. And that example may be messy and neurotic as hell, like most of us are, kind of. My beloved friend Elaine, who died recently, to whom I dedicated Wild Mercy, who made this bracelet, said, I don't have a single friend who's not at least a little bit Meshuggah. And those are people that she deeply respected and revered. So same here, man. I don't know anyone who doesn't have something, right? So looking to these women as exemplars, not from that masculine lens of what perfection and purification looks like, but through a very embodied, alive sense of what awakened wisdom is. It looks like walking this earth in all of these different forms. Take refuge in her, in all her manifestations. Take refuge in the Dharma. The Dharma is what? The teachings. So not just the discourses, the sutras of the Buddha as they have come to us, or of Jesus, or of all the great wisdom figures who've left us possibly their words. But take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings, the truth, in all its forms. But particularly, let's try this, in the female voice, across the religious traditions. Look to the teachings of the women. They're hard to find because they have been, as I said, intentionally and successfully buried. There's some in this book. And there are other collections of women's wisdom available to us. The poetry, as I said, the poetry of living women poets who are speaking truth, very embodied truth. find the Dharma and take refuge in it across the spiritual landscape through the mouths of the female people. And finally, take refuge in the Sangha. And this Thich Nhat Hanh and other great teachers have said is the most important of the three jewels, the Sangha. Thich Nhat Hanh, in fact, said the new Buddha, the next Buddha, there's like a second coming of the Buddha as there is of the Christ in Christianity and of the Mahdi in Islam. In Buddhism, there is a similar kind of sense that the Buddha will come again. The next Buddha, says Thich Nhat Hanh, is the Sangha. That's us. That's us. So take refuge in circles like this pop-up community that, as I said, we are creating here today, that we're weaving today. All the circles in your lives that you may already be involved in, know that that is the living water of truth and love. And if you're not already part of some circle, preferably way heavy on the female end of things, then create one or two. They exist virtually as well as physically. You can find your people, find your Sangha, those communities of other beings on the path of waking up and stepping up, and take your place in that circle. It's not always going to be like pleasant and sweet. And the feminine can be fierce too, and you're strong enough and you're brave enough to endure the challenges of these circles. They're vital. It's vital for us to take refuge in the Sangha and to create Sangha. And it doesn't have to adhere to any particular belief system. Okay, so we reclaimed Judaism and Buddhism before break. That was good. Now let's see who else we can pick on. So what I'd like to do is take just a few minutes again to come together. It'll be 2 minutes each once again. And if you're experiencing this virtually, you can do this through writing, through timed writing. And we'll take 2 minutes each in a moment to reflect on the question, what is the burden that you would like to lay down? So into that basket of the mother, as I read to you, that you can offer to her, knowing that she will transmute it. And again, like I wrote in that piece, it's not like it's all going to miraculously disappear, but some of it will. And what's left will no longer feel like a catastrophe. Which is the way our little amygdalas, wherever they live, where does the amygdala reside? Which part of the brain? Okay, so our little amygdalas, bless their little hearts, think that we're in big trouble, like most of the time. We're in fight or flight or freeze mode. And Shabbat helps us calm our nervous system and integrate and take refuge and remember that that urgency is not real. I mean, yes, there is an urgency to mend the broken world right now, no doubt, but we can't do it from that place of agitation and too muchness and not enoughness. We can do it from a deeply resourced place of drinking from those living waters of feminine loving kindness and wild creativity. And practicing Shabbat helps so much in having access to that. So, what is the burden you would like to lay at the feet of the mother, in the basket of the mother, the lap of the feminine? Now, if mother is a triggering archetype for you, then try lover or sister or something else. Some embodiment of loving kindness that will happily receive what you have to offer. Happily because she adores you. That's why. Not just because she's nice. Because you are the cutest, sweetest, most adorable thing. Of course she wants to receive whatever you have to offer. Okay, so quickly and quietly, if you will please come together in threes and stay there until I ring the bell, and then I'll ring the bell every 2 minutes. Well, again, we will do it just bearing loving witness to each other, no crosstalk, no advice. So how was that, sharing with each other some of the burdens on your heart? Good. You feel a little unburdened? Good. We are the mother transmuting the toxins for each other, right? Into gold.
You know what I found most interesting with this, and I don't know if anyone else experienced this, and I hope it's okay I'm sharing this. I found it almost more difficult to share it with a living human being than if like I had a statue of Mary in front of me
Right.
or a tree.
Yeah.
And I think just having that level of vulnerability with another human is scary.
Yeah. And alchemical.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you move through the fear?
Yeah.
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 Came out the other side of
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. They held my hand.
That's great. Did you know them already? Isn't that amazing? How we can become each other's companions on the way instantaneously when the space is opened. Yeah, beautiful. Well, as long as we opened it up, anybody else have a brief reflection or question? Yeah.
I've been doing a process of sharing with a friend as a practice around grieving. And I had no idea. I just started one 3 weeks ago. We've been doing it weekly. How much I would relate to everything she shared.
Oh.
And how held I felt in the process of sharing. So this is beautiful, and I'm going to continue it after, because this was an experiment I've been doing with my friend around grieving. I'm so grateful.
Yes, thank you so much. So bearing witness to each other's broken hearts is really powerful medicine, and we don't make enough space for doing that. That's reminding me I'm supposed to, for the sake of this recording, to restate the questions or reflections. So this reflection was just that you're doing this grieving work with some conscious grieving work with some people, and listening to their sharing, so you don't realize how much you're taking it in. Is that what you said?
And relating to everything they've shared, I really felt like I've personally been through it too, even if it wasn't the same story.
Same kind of loss, right? It's a different narrative, but loss is the human experience that connects us, isn't it? Beautiful, yeah. Being able to bear loving witness to each other's stories, to each other's hearts, is just such a gift, and so feminine. And then the other question, or reflection, to just distill it for the sake of restating, is just that it's so vulnerable to do that. You know, to share our hearts with each other, and especially seeming strangers. And Nancy said it would be easier to do it with a statue of Mary or a tree than to do it with these other people, and yet doing so felt so good. She felt so held. Yes.
You just said something. Loss is something about loss is how we connect, or I can't.
I don't know.
You just said something, and it just.
It's the human experience that connects us.
Yeah, the human experience that connects us.
I think you said grief. Grief or loss.
Grief and loss. Yeah. Who knows what she says? I don't know. I just work here. Luckily, there's a recording. You can rewind.
I mean, I don't know what that just did to me, but it did something.
Good. Yeah, it was one of those alchemical moments.
I had a lot of them today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying that. You know, speaking of grief and loss, I just have to name it because someone said something to me at break about losing her mom recently, very, very recently, that as we speak, as we're together today, my mother-in-law, my beloved mother-in-law, who's like a mother to me, is dying. And I can't be with her because I'm here with you. And so I'm happy to be here with you, and I feel very connected to her, but there's a part of me that's got a foot in the other world, you know, as she's leaving this one. I have to name that. Her name is Betty. So if you could just hold Betty's.
My neighbor's name.
Oh, if you can
she-
hold Betty's transition in your heart, I would be grateful. And to our companion whose mother's name is Nancy, right? I remember. Mhm. Our elders, our beloved elders. So, any other brief questions or sharings before we go on?
Yeah, I'd like to just give words to this, and I'll probably be able to not cry, but
Yeah.
what I was aware of is I don't feel a burden per se, but I feel a lot of grief and tears, both celebration and grief. Celebration of tasting the beloved. I have such a sense of devotion. And when I sense presence, I have a lot of tears in it. But so she's speaking to me now in music. What became clear to me when I was speaking was the need for men and the Shekhinah, the aspect of the feminine, the aspect of the welcoming, the aspect of the unconditional presence. Men need to do work in that, very specifically in that.
Yeah.
And we were speaking, and I was really recognizing the patriarch. To me, the word patriarch represents pain. I mean, pain for the men,
Yeah.
because they have to be so separate from themselves in order to deny life to others.
Yeah.
And it just really was a powerful sense of being one of the men that sees that. And the value of standing, waking up and showing up, or stepping forth, right, stepping up. And it just became a clearer possibility of being a representation of that, or a model of that, or just being that.
Yeah.
Included in what my teachings are anyway, but to begin to include it as an integral aspect of all my teaching, of mixed genders, as well as possibly something very specific about the men's journey and the Shekhinah, or the feminine, or kindness.
Yeah.
Languaging in an appropriate way. But so that just became clear to me during this.
Beautiful. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
And David will be giving us a little offering that I invited him to share on the sacred feminine right before lunch. So look forward to that. All right. I'm going to read you a little something and then talk a bit about it. How are you doing? You had a good break? You were able to sit for a little bit till lunch? Right after lunch, we'll do a little embodied movement and then some writing. So it will be an easier way to transition out of the lunchtime when all your juices are going to digesting your food from your brain. It's harder to sit and listen passively, isn't it? Breaking open, the alchemy of longing. So far, this incarnation has been fraught with losses, rife with disappointments, heavy with heartache. There have been untimely deaths of loved ones who seem to be about to cross the threshold into a beautiful and interesting life, not out of it. Serious health diagnoses that change the way you navigate space, relate to food, see your self-image. Love affairs that once contained all the seeds of your joy and then withered before your eyes. Hands on your body that had no right to be there, making you mistrust the hands you really wanted on your body. Betrayals by colleagues or cousins, financial ruin, debilitating addictions. When you breathe into the pain of your losses, you detect the presence of a smoldering ember you thought had been snuffed out years ago. But there it is, fragrant and warm. If you blew on it now, it would burst into flame. Longing for God. You don't believe in God anymore, not as a personified entity that grants wishes and smacks you down. And yet, this burning yearning has never really gone away. In your broken open state, you remember what it feels like to feel separate from the one, to want union, to want it with every fiber of your being. This longing confounds you, and you don't know what to do with it, so you press it back down. At first, you will not recognize the radiance hidden in all the darkness that has befallen you. The yearning, the grief. You will not be equipped with the skills required to translate the secret welcome home sign planted in your soul's ravaged landscape. It will look like keep out. If someone were to tell you that your losses were your passage to a voyage across the sea of samsara, the suffering of illusion, to the land of nirvana, the bliss of awakening, you would not believe them. Even if 20 people or 100 told you that this pain was a blessing, you would not believe them. You might want to hurt them. You will think you are doing it wrong, that your suffering is not redemptive, it is messy and awkward, unspiritual. Your discovery of the restorative root system underlying your ruined life will come later, in the inevitable springtime, when the small green shoots of compassion muscle their way up and out of the charred earth and begin to spread and bud and flower and propagate themselves. You will eat because you will be hungry, and then you will feed the world because you will not be able to resist the impulse to share the bounty. This is the most delicious tea somebody made me. Oranges and clove. It's good to have a body sometimes, huh? So, one of the things I'm interested in is reclaiming longing. You may have noticed the holiness of the heart's yearning. Yearning for union with the beloved, which is not predicated on any particular belief system about some kind of personified God figure, but is this innate thirst to return to what we belong to, from which we feel sometimes cut off. And I think all of us can relate to that birthright of longing to be reconnected to that which is our source, which feels like love, that our source is love itself. And so rather than serve as some kind of obstacle to non-dual awareness, our longing becomes the vehicle for reconnecting with the divine. And all the mystics of all traditions, men and women and people of no particular gender identification, affirm that the cry of the heart is what connects us to that which we're calling out for. And so in many ways, some of these teachings that have come to us through the different spiritual traditions, like the Advaita Vedanta tradition of Hinduism that says that we are that which we long for, it's good stuff, but it often, those concepts render us somehow doing it, that we feel like we're doing it wrong if we're still longing for God, because you already are God. What are you longing for? What's your problem? And we feel like there's something wrong with us. Instead of recognizing what the mystics of all traditions have always taught us, which is that there is that cry of the heart that is actually the portal, the opening, the passageway to the landscape of love, where we belong. And so that's what I want us to allow ourselves to feel. And maybe you don't feel that way, it might just not be your nature. I happen to be an Enneagram 4, so I live in longing. Any other Enneagram 4s in this room? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, check it out, the Enneagram. Very interesting psycho-spiritual instrument. And so for some people, there's no longing because there's no sense of separation. For others, there is no, it's impossible to conceive of the great mystery, the ground of being, as some kind of personified entity that you're missing. So this isn't for everyone, but often, if we're not experiencing or never have experienced that sense of longing, it may be that it's there waiting as a present to be unwrapped rather than as an illusion to be transcended. And for some of us, it was that longing that started us on our spiritual path, perhaps many years ago, maybe decades ago, and then we grew out of it, or so we thought, as if it were an issue of maturity. And that's what the kind of established spiritual traditions suggest, is that when we mature spiritually, we'll get over that kind of adolescent craving for God as some person who ran away from us. And so in reclaiming the feminine, I'm interested in the ways that we can reconnect with that fire of yearning that is our birthright and is our opening. Because that fire melts the heart, melts the boundaries around the heart, so that we can actually then pour into each other. Self into divine, divine into self. No crusty edges to separate us. The fire of longing, the burning yearning, is what softens the heart and allows us to meet the beloved right there in that flaming field of love. Okay? The other thing about the feminine path is that not only is longing a blessing in this way of navigating as a feminine mystic in this world, but as I mentioned earlier, liminal spaces are holy spaces. The in-between places of our lives and of our spiritual journeys are not problems to be solved. They're not obstacles to be gotten over as quickly as possible. Like, let me get through this darkness between the this and the that so that I can get on with it. But actually, the feminine invites us to abide in liminal spaces as holy, holy places. These kind of not dark and not dawn, but dusk-like threshold places that are fecund and fertile and creative and filled with aliveness. It's like the desert, you know. You look at the desert, I'm from the desert, so I know how alive it is. You look at a desert landscape and you think, well, ain't nothing going on here. It's barren, it's dead, it's boring. And yet, when you really show up in a desert space with your presence and your curiosity, and you don't rush through it to get away from it, but actually begin to investigate it with curiosity and tenderness. Oh my God, what lives in the desert is extraordinary. The aliveness of those desert spaces. Anyone familiar with desert landscapes, physical deserts? Am I right? Mm-hmm. About the life that's teeming in the desert. And it forces you to slow down. The desert forces you to slow down. Right now in New Mexico, where I live, it's tarantula migration season. So the tarantulas, the dude tarantulas are ambling around looking for their girl tarantulas. Their beloveds. They're yearning for the beloved. And they move really slowly. And I have one on my phone, I'll show you. There are these big, anyone familiar with tarantulas? Yeah. Big, dark, fuzzy creatures. And if you want to see a tarantula on his love journey, you have to, if you want to bear witness, you have to slow down. Slow down and crouch down and get down in the dust and just hang out for a while and watch. That's the space I'm talking about. It requires patience, curiosity, and willingness to really be present, to discover that these liminal spaces are sacred spaces. They're holy places. And the feminine is at home in liminal space. The feminine is okay with ambiguity. Things don't have to be this or that, or clear and boundaried and legislated. In fact, better when they're not. That if we don't exactly have a clear solution to any given seeming issue, that's okay, because we're actually able, in the vast container of the feminine heart, whether we're men, women, or any other gender, to hold ambiguity comfortably, to tolerate not knowingness, not only to tolerate it, but to celebrate it, to celebrate not knowingness. That's really what the dark night of the soul is, the teaching of the dark night of the soul by the 16th century Spanish mystic, St. John of the Cross, San Juan de la Cruz. Dark night of the soul is not about deep depression or having a hard time, trying to get through a difficult divorce or the death of a loved one necessarily. It's about when all of our attachments to the way we think the spiritual life is supposed to look and feel, and the sense we think it should make, is stripped away from us. Sometimes circumstances will be a catalyst for that true spiritual crisis known as a dark night of the soul, which is a transformational landscape, the dark nights of our souls. So an external circumstance or series of conditions can serve as a catalyst for that spiritual nakedness of the dark night when we're stripped of all our ideas and opinions on the matter. But not necessarily. Sometimes the dark night of the soul just comes upon us, and we often don't know what to do with it. It's like the things that used to connect us to a felt sense of the divine. Maybe chanting. I love chanting. We'll do some of that today too. We're cramming a lot into this Wild Mercy Day. Chanting or singing in church or meditating or doing certain meditations or yoga or walking in nature. Whatever our reliable practices are that have faithfully connected us to a sense of that larger reality that is love. In a dark night of the soul, we stop feeling it. The feelings dry up. And we're like, uh-oh, I must be doing something wrong. Or God doesn't like me anymore. And we don't feel it anymore. And it's bad. It's a crisis. And then, John of the Cross says, if we progress beyond that, if we're actually able to show up for that and tolerate it and be present to it, we might get to the state of what he calls the adept. So the first part of the dark night of the soul he calls the night of sense, when we can't feel the juice anymore. And then the night of spirit might come, which is when all of our conceptual constructs crumble. All our belief systems come undone. They do not hold us anymore. Doesn't make sense. That's a transformational, liminal, desert threshold space. That's where we are remade. And our only task is to show up for it, to be present, to not try to fix it because there's nothing broken. Not try to fill the emptiness because the emptiness is boundlessness. And that's holy ground. So there are mystics like Santa Teresa de Avila, who was actually the guru, the teacher of St. John of the Cross, who celebrated these broken open spaces as being holy, sacred land. That when we are undone, we are made so naked that we can have a direct experience of the beloved. And Teresa of Avila was one of those people that was incredibly efficient and powerful, and she had her shit together, and she was the administrator of her monasteries and convents, and she, drew up plans like an architect and engaged in psychotherapeutic sessions with her nuns. She knew how to do all the things and do them well. She was charming, she was beautiful, she was smart. She wrapped the inquisitors, the Spanish inquisitors, around her finger. She had them on a short leash. They had to do what she said rather than the other way around. This was a person who was grounded and capable and skilled. And yet, when she had her experiences, one primary experience that opened the floodgates for all the others, of love, of wild, passionate love for the beloved, all of that just fell away, and her heart became a living flame of love, as John of the Cross calls it. And Teresa walked this beautiful line of groundedness and wild, passionate yearning for God, and presence with God, connectedness to who she called the beloved. She said, it's even when he's not actually actively with me, it's sort of like sleeping with a lover. How she knew that, we don't know. In the dark, you know that they're there. You can hear them breathing. You don't need them to say anything or even touch you to know that your beloved is with you. And she famously said, Teresa said, the important thing is not to think much, but to love much, and so to do whatever awakens you to love. First part of that sentence was, if you want to make progress on the path and ascend to the places your soul longs for, the important thing is not to think much, but to love much, and so to do whatever best awakens you to love. My friend Tessa Bilecki, who's a Teresian scholar and also a sister in the Carmelite order, wrote a book called Ecstasy and Common Sense about Teresa. Ecstasy and Common Sense, that sums her up right there. And that's the way of the feminine. There's a grounding, practical ability to get shit done, and there's this wild openness to the glory of both the yearning and the connecting to the one. So, is this relating to anybody? Are you getting that? So the feminine makes space for ambiguity, for paradox, that seemingly contradictory propositions actually create a larger, greater truth. It's a space of liminality, of mystery, of creativity. And importantly, of vulnerability. I know a lot of great teachers are reclaiming vulnerability as a sacred gift these days. From Brene Brown to her picture's out on the wall, my friend, what's her name? The Empath's Guide, Judith Orloff, to Survival. So there are a lot of us who are singing this song that allowing ourselves to not know, allowing ourselves to have pain, to get our feelings hurt and say so. These are the kinds of things that the patriarchy has told us are not good, not spiritual, not strong. And we are finding our strength in our tenderness. So keep doing that. Keep doing that. All right, I'm gonna, let me just give you a couple more examples of that longing and yearning and at homeness with vulnerability before I do this reading and invite our guest. So who else? Mary Magdalene. Let's talk about Mary Magdalene for a moment, shall we? Anybody into Mary Magdalene? Yeah, I'm like obsessed with her these days. And what started it was actually reading the Gospel of Mary. Has anyone read it? The Gnostic Gospel, the not forgotten. It wasn't like, oops, where did I put that thing? But the Gospel that was intentionally buried by the church, the early guys who were trying to control stuff, them. So the Gospel of Mary is fascinating and profound, and oh my God, it's so rich. So it's only a fragment. A lot of it is lost. Just when you read it, it's just heartbreaking because you just wonder, what did she say? There have been several novels written recently where people are trying to fill in those missing pages of the Gospel of Mary. But anyway, that's what kind of started me down the Mary Magdalene rabbit hole. One of the things that I love in that Gospel is that she's rebuked by Andrew, I think it is, and Peter. Definitely Peter. He was always giving Mary Magdalene shit, right? And her response is not to gird her loins and stand up and say, Peter, that's not right. Here, let me tell you the way it really is. When he criticizes her for daring to give teachings, as her beloved Jesus transmitted to her, you give these teachings now, I'm not going to be here very much longer, and you need to be the one to carry this on. And Peter was like, who do you think you are? And instead of saying, this is who I am, dude, she, I think, burst into tears. You can tell from the Gospel. And she said, Peter, why are you questioning me? That hurts. You know, this hurts my feelings. You got it wrong. Let me tell you, this is what the rabbi told me to say, and this is what he entrusted me with, and I'm trying to share it with you because I love you. And am I right? Isn't that interpretation of Mary's Gospel? So it's that vulnerability, that tenderness of heart is not a flaw. It's not something, a fly in the ointment. It's not something wrong with your particular design. If sometimes you feel pain and grief and feel misunderstood, it's the longing for connection, and that longing for connection is the connection. And Mary Magdalene embodies that. When she wanted Jesus, she burst into the halls of the rich and powerful, where Jesus happened to be dining, and she went to him and she flung herself at his feet and it's like, there you are, beloved, I've been looking for you everywhere. Not only that, but she anointed him because she knew what was coming. And not only did she anoint him, pre-death, you anoint the body after death, she anointed him with priceless oil because that love is beyond all measure. In some Gospels, in a couple of the stories, she anoints his feet or she anoints his head with this precious oil. In another, she anoints him with what? Her tears. And dries them with her hair. Now, contemporary feminist Catholic women understandably have said that's just reinforcing the whole idea of Mary as less than, of feminine submissiveness and subservience, and they're trying to distance themselves from that image of Mary. It's almost like the repentant Mary, but it's not repentant at all. It's the heart that crying out with longing for the beloved, embodied, that she would do anything, get past any obstacles. She doesn't belong in those halls of the rich, powerful dudes. Does that stop her? No, nothing stops her. No amount of important stuff that should be saved for a more appropriate occasion is going to stop her from anointing her beloved. From weeping, anointing his feet with her tears and drying them with her hair. I don't want to lose that narrative. I don't want to lose that narrative. There's everything in that narrative. And was she a powerful woman? Certainly. Very. She was wealthy, she was privileged, and she gave it all to the Dharma, for the sake of the Dharma, or the Torah, or the whatever you might call it. And many women mystics across the spiritual landscape did that. My namesake, Mirabai, the 16th century bhakti poet, devotional poet, in love with Lord Krishna, the god of love. She risked everything. She squandered every resource for the sake of her beloved. And she got into big trouble politically, and with the family that she married into, which was a royal family. They didn't appreciate it at all. In fact, they tried to kill her. But everything they did just turned into love. So all of the great mystics of all the spiritual traditions, I was just thinking about in Islam, we were talking about people with power, women in power who gave it all over for love. And sometimes we forget that they were rooted in a sense of their own resources, didn't need the men to resource them. I'm thinking of Khadija in the story of the Prophet Muhammad. His wife, Khadija, was 15 years older than he was. He was an illiterate camel driver, the Prophet Muhammad, and she was a wealthy, powerful, educated woman, 15 years his senior, who asked him to marry her because she fell in love with him because he was so beautiful. And so not beautiful just physically, although they say that he was, but just such a beautiful person, loving and kind and compassionate and wise and courteous, and everyone felt welcomed by his very presence. And she fell madly in love with him and said, "Would you please marry me?" And he did. And did she stop being a powerful, resourceful woman in her own right? No. In fact, she was the first one to recognize when the Holy Quran came pouring through him that he was on to something and that it was real. He thought he was going crazy, and he went to her and he said, "What is going on?" And she said, he said, "I think I'm losing my mind." And she said, "You're the sanest person I know. If you're claiming that you're receiving this love poetry from God, then I believe you." And she became his first believer. Because I am madly in love with all of these different spiritual traditions, it's kind of irresistible for me to draw from all of them to make a point. But I'm gonna move toward closing this section on longing and ambiguity and vulnerability and the holiness thereof with another reading. And then after lunch, at the end of the day, actually, I'm going to give you time, ample time for interaction with me. You're going to also have some more interactions with each other, but you can ask questions. So jot them down or otherwise distill them, and know that their time will come that you get to ask and share. Because are you feeling things bubbling up right now? A little bit, some epiphanies and so on. Me too. That's why I do this. It's sort of counter to the feminine paradigm that I'm offering you, for me to be sitting here in the teacher chair here and you all be out there, but I don't know quite what to do about that. But what I do want to say is that this is all of us that are rising to the call. I happen to be putting these particular words around it right now, but it is a collective call and a communal response that's happening, and that's what drew you here. That's why if you read Wild Mercy, you're saying, "Oh yeah, I know that. Yes, this is my truth." At least I hope some of it. Okay. Melting down, dissolving into the one. Now I'm going to contradict everything I said before, which is what we get to do. Except it's not a contradiction, it's a, thank you, paradox. Paradox. Paradox is a she. Ever since you first tasted the elixir of nobodiness, maybe in the midst of meditating or grieving, you have lost your hunger for somebodyness. Mainstream culture conditioned you to construct a persona and defend it with all your might. Bless you. The endless self-improvement project, fueled by self-loathing and foiled by the realities of the human condition, has only reinforced the illusion that you're separate from your source. But a combination of spiritual practice and tragic losses ended that game. You, for one, are relieved to surrender. Your surrender is invisible. You still go through the motions of promoting your work on social media. You make an effort to limit your carbs, practice yoga, pick out interesting things to wear. But that's not because you actually identify as an individual being, detached from all other beings, or from the earth, or from the Holy One. You have come to understand that a functioning ego is a necessary vessel for an incarnate soul. You don't regard your ego as a problem. You just don't take it seriously, which used to piss your ego off, given her self-important nature, but she's getting used to it. When you were young, you recognized ultimate reality as beloved, and you developed a powerful crush. Over the decades, your roles reversed and reversed again. You were the seeker. You were the sought. Eventually, in moments of deep stillness or unbearable anguish, lover and beloved melded. Only love remained. This state of suchness looked like emptiness, but felt like plenitude. You came to understand that not only have you been connected to your beloved all along, but you are that which you had been seeking. You had expected God to be the prize you would collect after all the hard work of seeking God. It turns out that the object you thought of as you does not exist, which means the subject you called God is not real either. You would have anticipated such an insight to be devastating, but it isn't. It's amusing. Chuckling at the cosmic joke, you get on with business. There are temples to build, curricula to develop, sonatas to compose, startups to start up. You did not buy your equanimity cheaply. Frequent firestorms eradicated your opinion on the matter. Multiple meltdowns led you to a place where your only option was to melt. Who knew that dissolving could be so sweet? Oh. So this is a wildly creative space, this feminine space, where all of the ways that we thought it was supposed to be are relaxed and released. And we make of ourselves a vessel for the inflowing of the feminine, of the Shekhinah, of Shakti in the Hindu tradition, the primordial creative energy of the universe. And we can't do it when we're in our own way, with all of our ideas of what the spiritual life is, or what it looks like to be of service in the world. And all of those ways that we trip ourselves up and fill up the blessed emptiness with our own efforts to control. She comes when we allow. So that's why the feminine isn't just about loving kindness, and just about forgiveness and mercy and compassion, although she certainly is all of that. But she's also about the wild and the unpredictable and the dangerously sensual, and all of these qualities that subvert the established institutions. So keep subverting. It's your job. All right. I want to see how my timing is. Perfect. I love it when I do that. I think it comes from all those years of classroom teaching. You just sort of have the built-in clock. Any teachers in the
Yeah.
Yeah, right. You have a built-in clock. All right, so what I would like to do is introduce my friend David, and who has very graciously offered to share with you something that I had the honor of experiencing a couple of weeks ago at the Science and Non-Duality Conference.
Usually when I present something, I'm not inspired for 2 hours beforehand so deeply. So I always believe in the co-creation, this concept that there is no singular separation. So what you're about to see is also a result of what's been moved to be expressed through the form I've created, but the depth of the heart is being nourished and fertilized deeply today. That'll be part of what you expect. So, hi, David Elsie. And what you're about to see, I think the best words that I will use are the last words that you used, Mirabai, which was the melding into one and the sense of dissolving being so sweet. So I'm just going to leave that with you. What you're about to see will be explained as I do it. You'll see movement, silence, storytelling. I was trained by a mime in a mystic tradition. So please enjoy. I call this making the invisible visible.
There was a time when I was trained how to make the invisible visible. That, and the story that I will tell, is what you are about to witness.
I didn't know. I didn't know the day that I was born what was to come. I didn't know when I was 14 years old I would look into a starlit night sky, infinite in nature, and feel a cosmic presence look back at me. I didn't know when I was 17 I would be trained by a Kabbalistic mystic to fashion universes out of an empty stage, and that stage would be a metaphor for life. I didn't know. I didn't know that I would be standing here in this moment speaking with you together, as the lyricist Paulo Coelho says, in this precious moment. This little parenthesis in eternity. I didn't know I would be speaking to you about how duality, polarity, opposites are required for this world to occur. And that the polarities of feminine and masculine must be equal, because if the feminine is not allowed, we perish. I didn't know that a few months ago, what was invisible will become invisible today in a story about a man, a husband and a wife and a child. But not just a human story. A story about how when the feminine is allowed, the transformation that is possible. That is the story you are about to see. has asked, allowed, invited this moment to be more than just a performance. This was sacred, this stage, in this moment, but throughout history, before it became just entertainment. It was meant for the transformation and the awakening. And so in this moment, if you'd be willing, I invite you to bring home what you're experiencing right now from watching someone perform to within yourself, this tenderness that you may feel. I invite you to take a moment with me right now. If you be willing, you can do this with your eyes closed or your eyes open. We all have a part of us that wants to push back, to fight back, that's angry, it's ashamed. And it's time for us to be the Shekhinah, the welcoming presence for ourselves and for all those parts. So for a moment, if you'd be willing, you just take just a couple of minutes. Allow your eyes to be closed if you wish. And would you be open in this moment, in your lifetime, this moment, to allow those parts of you that you haven't allowed to come home to your own arms, the arms of the infinite, which is embodied as you, the warmth of the embrace, the benevolent presence of the feminine, the welcoming. Would you be open to allow those parts of you that you've kept hidden from yourself to be finally welcomed home, to those arms that you saw in this piece, but no longer do you see them with your eyes, but you feel them now with your heart. There is no time here, no distance. This is a timeless moment. Welcome your own parts that you've banished home. Very, very gentle, loving breaths. The breath is the invisible made visible. It is the love loving itself. It is the beloved breathing. Every cell, every molecule, every space of emptiness is filled now. Full breath, fill your lungs. Let out a gentle, loving sigh. And allow the possibility that this isn't a one-time process. Be open to your life being filled with this same love. When you're ready, allow the eyes to open.
Thank you, David. And so let's just settle back in. Find a comfortable seat in your seat. And I invite you once again to take 3 deep, full cleansing breaths. With each breath, feeling your attention settle back into this moment, this particular body that you have today, such that it is, whatever it may be feeling and experiencing, making a welcoming space for whatever is. 3 deep, full, revitalizing breaths at your own pace. Take your time. Inviting yourself with each breath to fully inhabit the present moment. We're going to do a chant. Unfortunately, I'm having a frog in my throat. Get out of there, frog. So the words are very simple. They're in Sanskrit. Hey Mata Durga. Hey Mata Durga, which is calling upon Mother Durga, the mother of the universe, to be with you, to fill you, like we were invoking the Shekhinah earlier. So we're calling out to the Divine Mother, the embodiment of fierce and loving kindness, compassion, energy, clarity, the clarity to cut through illusion. So it's what I would invite you to do is listen one time through. It's a kind of melodic progression, and then sing with me whenever you're ready. Any singers in this room? I'm gonna need you. Okay, so like the minute after I go through the first round, the minute you pick up on it, please, because I'm not a singer as you are about to see here. So this is a chant, it's not a performance. So this is something we're going to be doing together. So I invite you to kind of soften your heart and cultivate that place inside you that is receptive, that knows that you need her, that you need her. Hey Mata Durga, Hey Mata. Here, I'm going to go through the whole thing first, okay? So it's actually, I don't know, it's like 6 Hey Mata Durgas. I forgot to tell you that part. So you just listen, because it's going to go through a progression. And then when I finish the whole thing, I'll let you know. I'll raise my hands or something, and you'll know that that's where you come in. Hey Mata Durga, 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 Mata, 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 Mata. So that's how it goes. You can kind of hear how it moves from one Mata Durga to the next, right? Can you hear that flow? So we'll just sing it a few times until it feels like we're finished for now. Hey Mata Durga, Hey Mata Durga, Hey Mata Durga, Hey Mata Durga, Hey Mata Durga. any percussionists out there, feel free to keep the beat however you want. Hey Mata Durga, 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 Mata, 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 Mata. Hey Mata Durga, 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 Mata, 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 Mata. One more time. With all your heart. Hey Mata Durga, 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 Mata, Mata, Jema. A poem. Mother Wisdom Speaks by Christine Lore Weber. Some of you I will hollow out. I will make you a cave. I will carve you so deep the stars will shine in your darkness. You will be a bowl. You will be the cup collecting rain. You will be the cup in the rock collecting rain. I will hollow you with knives. I will not do this to make you clean. I will not do this to make you pure. You are clean already. You are pure already. I will do this because the world needs the hollowness of you. I will do this for the space that you will be. I will do this because you must be large, a passage. People will find their way through you. A bowl. People will eat from you, and their hunger will not weaken them to death. A cup to catch the sacred rain. My daughter, do not cry. Do not be afraid. Nothing you need will be lost. I am shaping you. I am making you ready. Light will flow in your hollowing. You will be filled with light. Your bones will shine. The round open center of you will be radiant. I will call you brilliant one. I will call you daughter who is wide. I will call you transformed. Good one, huh?
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do some writing now, get the juices flowing. Are you ready for that? So, yeah, people should have paper and pens in your packets, right? I think. So I hear. Oh, okay. What is in your packet? And you have my Shekhinah poem in there, prayer in there? Oh, good. So someone was asking about how to spell Shekhinah. It's in your packet.
Does anyone need a pen?
Thank you, Infinity.
Anyone need a pen?
Sit.
Make my space.
You keep asking these wonderful subversive questions. Look, it's me. Do you think you have to do anything?
No, I'm like, can I go over there?
You can do whatever you want, honey. I'm not trying to control you. All right. I'm trying to uncontrol you. I'm trying to discontrol you. I'm trying to decolonize the control mechanism. Or something. Mixing my metaphors as usual. All right. So, yes, in a moment I'm going to give you a writing prompt. You can go wherever you want as long as you come back in 5 minutes, which is the challenge. You know, it's hard to go too far and get any writing done and then come back. So, are any of you familiar with Natalie Goldberg and writing practice? Several of you. So you will recognize elements of her in this practice that I'm about to give you, which is not a quinky dink because I studied with Natalie when I was 12. She was my English teacher at our little hippie school in Taos, New Mexico. And guess what? It gets even better. Pema Chodron was our social studies teacher. Except her name was Deirdre.
Oh my gosh.
And that's where I met Ram Dass and a lot of other people. This is the way I grew up in the counterculture. Did I not mention that? Yeah. It's all in my memoir, Caravan of No Despair. It's a tell-all about those days. So anyway, Natalie worked with us. Those of you who don't know Natalie Goldberg, look her up. It was just a little group of 12 kids in a homemade hogan. We built a Navajo hogan with a sand-floored wood stove. It's very cold in Taos. People think New Mexico is like Phoenix or something, but I've come from northern New Mexico, which is a skiing destination. So it's very cold. It's like this except drier. But it's 7,000 feet up in the mountains. Anyway, that was where this story unfolded. And from that group of 12-year-olds, Natalie created what became writing practice, which she's taught to literally millions of people around the world. And the practice is the important part of this description, because it's not writing practice to get better at writing, or writing as an essay that you're going to submit to the Sun magazine or something. This is writing as a spiritual practice. So we're writing from the depths of our being, and the way we access those deep places in ourselves is by writing fast and writing without stopping. So in a moment I'm going to give you a prompt, and your invitation is to just start immediately. The second I ring the bell, I'm going to give you a prompt, ring the bell, and you're going to start writing and keep your hand moving the whole time. Even if you think you don't have anything to say that. And then I will ring the bell at the end of the 5 minutes, and you'll stop. I might give you a little warning that it's coming, so you can wind things up. But the idea is not to put a pretty bow on it. This is not homework. This is spiritual practice. This is accessing what your own wild mind, as Natalie calls it, really want to say, or your wild heart, let's call it. So the guidelines are to keep your hand moving, to not edit yourself, not censor yourself, to allow whatever arises to come, to not worry about spelling, punctuation, grammar, handwrite, what is that called, penmanship, or any of that. The task is to tell the truth. And stay grounded in the body. People have a tendency to write about, oh my God, how I wish that I were, it's like people get very lofty and abstract and conceptual. Bring your writing home to the body. All the things I've been reading to you today, not just my own, but the other people's pieces that I've read to you have all been very grounded and embodied. Have you noticed that? They have a lot of nouns and a lot of verbs, a lot of sensory details, and a lot of aliveness. So stay alive in your writing and avoid philosophy. I think that is it. Now, people get really mad at me when I don't tell them ahead of time that you're going to be sharing in triads. So I don't want to tell you. Guess why? You will. You just will. So see if you can trust the unity that's been happening here, this magical community that's been weaving this day, and see if you can take refuge in that and take risks in the container of community to really tell your truth. As such that is, you're not even going to know what it is until you start writing, and it may very well surprise you what arises. So please, please, please try to leave Fritz at the door. Fritz is what my friend Elaine called the internal critic, that little Nazi dude that lives in there, that tells you that you're wrong or bad or this is dangerous and don't go there. Allow the internal censor to stay outside of this sacred space here. You'd never catch Natalie dead calling something sacred space, by the way, so this is my adaptation. Okay, good. So the prompt is write to the divine feminine. Bless you. Write, you can say a love letter, a love song, a love poem. Could be, it doesn't have to be all lovey-dovey. It could be whatever it is you want to say to her, to the sacred feminine, which you don't have to believe in with your brain. Right? It's something you want to say to her right now. Go. shake out your hand or massage it a little, because guess what? There's part 2. It builds fire, this practice. So the next prompt, same guidelines, just write without stopping, no censoring, stay grounded in the body. The next prompt is writing a love letter from the Divine Mother to you. To you, from her to you. 5 minutes, go. So how was that?
Amazing, Caroline. Thank you.
Did anyone hate it?
Loved it.
All right, so you hated it?
No, I didn't hate it. It was just interesting. There was many moments where I didn't know what was gonna come next.
In your writing?
Because I really just kind of let go of the whole thing, and there was an edge.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of an edge, and I just let it just keep writing, because I had no clue what was coming, and almost felt like I didn't have anything. And then
Right.
it just came. But there was, so when you say hate's a pretty strong word, there were moments of discomfort.
Yeah, of course. There were moments of discomfort because you didn't know what was coming next. I was trying to say back what you said in a distilled way. And so there was that feeling of just really getting out of your own way. It sounded like you really took the plunge and allowed yourself to not be in control of the situation and see what would come. And it was surprising and a little uncomfortable because we're not used to getting out of the driver's seat like that. Yeah, good. Anyone else? Yes.
Mine definitely wasn't myself.
Hmm.
It wasn't even words I would use.
Oh, wow.
It had like a poetic sense to it, which it just felt, as when I read it out loud to my group, it sounded as if someone else wrote it.
Ah. And was that a positive experience for you to feel like someone else was writing it?
It was hard for me to read it because I was trying not to cry, reading it for the first time to myself.
Yeah. The second part, especially when she was writing to you, or really throughout?
Yes, when she was writing to me. She even signed it Mata.
Wow.
And I'd never heard of that word before. Cool.
Oh, very interesting. So she even signed it Mata, mother, in Sanskrit. And that surprising voice that when you read it out loud sounds like, in a way, you're hearing it for the first time. Did anybody else have a similar experience of being surprised by what came, as if you were being spoken to? Yeah?
I did. I mean, even writing it, when you're writing it, both letters, it's in your head and you're writing, but when you're reading it, it's something totally different.
Right.
But when I noticed the second part is reading the letter from, you have to receive the love that's being poured onto you, and that's the part that's really moving.
Yeah.
Because that's the love that we don't receive for ourselves. And when you get that, then you really realize that you are somebody special. You are somebody here with a purpose. And that is amazing.
Beautiful. Did anyone else feel deeply moved when you heard what she had to say to you?
Oh,
Because
yes.
it was about unconditional love.
Yeah.
And who gets to say that to yourself or hear it? Good. So there was the experience of writing it, the experience of daring to share it, and then the experience of receiving other people's offerings. What were some of the differences or even similarities between those three experiences you just had? Writing it, sharing it, and listening.
Listening was incredibly powerful.
Listening was incredibly powerful. Just how so?
Hearing their words and having them come within me.
There was a resonance.
Yeah, bringing emotion and like the space was opening to hold their words.
So they moved you. Their writings moved you, not just what the mothers had to say to you, for instance, but hearing other people call out to her and hearing other people receive her.
And I had the vision of the poem that you were talking about that was hollowing out
Yeah,
and making space.
beautiful. Thank you. There was a hand over
Yeah,
here.
the love of the mother,
Mm.
the love of the mother that I can hear in all of the readings.
Yeah.
And it felt similar. The love was similar.
Right. Good. Yes.
I had the
Oh, and then over here. You're hiding back in my peripheral vision.
I had the experience of not being able to participate in the writing, but only in listening. And it was a huge gift. I'm visually impaired, can't see down.
Yeah.
So this is my first experience publicly like this, and I thank you for reading.
Oh, sweetheart, thank you for giving us your faith to do this with us. Very powerful to hear. Thank you.
I felt that the writing created the connection with higher self, and I felt the listening created a connection with other people. It was outside of my body, it was with others. And
Yeah. How interesting. Did you hear that? So she
Yeah.
felt like the writing connected her with her higher self, and the listening connected her with everyone else, with community. Beautiful. Yes.
I think that the most profound part of it for me was how we all want the same thing.
Yeah.
And we gave it not only to ourselves, but to each other by the reading out loud. I just found that so profound.
Yeah. We all want the same thing, and it happened. It came. Beautiful. Yes.
I also found it interesting that I really wanted to, maybe in my uncomfortableness, I wanted to say something. And I found it very powerful that we were explicitly told not to.
Right.
So I just wanted to affirm that, you know, that I liked it, or
Yeah.
it was powerful, or, you know, I wanted to react.
Yeah, there's a method in that madness for sure. There is a power in not having to say and not receiving the stuff that people say. I was in a women's writing group for 20-something years, and there were approximately 7 of us. Sometimes one person would leave, sometimes another person would come, new person would come in, but it was basically 7 people, and mostly the same 7 women over the years. And we never gave feedback on each other's writings, but we were so intimate because of just the power of bearing witness to each other through all the things that unfolded in the course of a life of over 20 years. I think some of you know that I'm a bereaved mother. My 14-year-old daughter Jenny was killed in a car accident when my first book came out, which was a translation of Dark Night of the Soul by San Juan de la Cruz, St. John of the Cross. The same day, actually, the very, very same day. And my writing group, well, not only were they able to hold space for my impossible, unbearable anguish, but those 7 women bathed my daughter's body and prepared her for cremation. They were the most intimate people in my life, and we never said a word about each other's writings or much of anything else. We'd get together, we'd share leadership, rotate leadership. So here's another practice you can take with you. Creating Sangha. We talked about the Sangha being the most important of the 3 jewels. Convene, what's the word? A writing group. And you can meet once a month, you can meet once a week if you're ambitious. For a couple of hours is really all you need. And rotate leadership so that one person is in charge of each time. And then by the end of that session, you you delegate the next person, or someone volunteers for the following time. The way we would do it is the person who was in charge would bring usually a few poems or prose passages, lyrical prose passages, and they would read that piece, and then we'd pull a line out of it. So say you were reading a Mary Oliver poem, Wild Geese. I'm picking that because it seems like everybody knows that poem. You don't have to be good. You don't have to walk 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Those are the opening lines of this beautiful poem, Wild Geese, by Mary Oliver. So maybe we'll pull out the line, let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. You write that at the top of the paper, everybody does, or the tablet, whatever you're using, and that becomes the prompt. Go, 10 minutes. Usually it's at least 10 minutes per session, sometimes 15, sometimes 20. 5 you can do as a warm-up. And then everyone reads. And then you do another round with another poem or a prose passage, short prose passage. Like that. There you go. There's your Sangha. You're welcome. You can do that. You can totally do that. And it will become a precious part of your life, I promise you, if you do it. So the intimacy of sharing without commentary can be so powerful, as you've witnessed. So I would like to hear one of each. So you can either volunteer, think about it for a moment, feel into it, or you can suggest somebody else that you heard, and if they accept, great. So let's first have an example of writing to the divine feminine. Thank you. Remind me of your name.
Chris Moses.
Okay, Chris, thanks.
The divine feminine, dear Mother Earth, I love the idea of you and embodying you, but it is so hard to practice it or even ask it on a daily basis. Where are you? Where have you gone? When I think about it, I feel angry at all the men, at all the religions, at all the establishment, cry again, that has usurped and taken and oppressed our powers and our abilities to be who we are. I can't remember. Our juices to flow the way of the world and nature, just like the rivers, like the flowers bloom. So with that anger over with and off my chest, for now, I invite you in. Your beauty is astounding, and I want to stand outside, sit outside, be on your earth, and take you to every cell and pour into my being. To love you, to nurture you, to let you hold me, to ask that you hold me in your beauty and never leave. And this includes me being able to withstand being outside all the time, no matter what.
Thank you, Chris. Can we have an example of a letter from her? Yes. Oh, this is the one that surprised you.
My child, I've been with you always, watching from the sidelines like a proud parent. You don't need me to hold your hand. You walk in my light, our light, and are of my being. Your flesh is my flesh, and so it is. Your desires run wild. Bring them to me so that I may relieve your sorrows. Let your tears flow without shame. Feel my warm embrace always. Know your truth and feel yourself. Your soul is my soul, and so it is. May your light burn bright, brighter than any star or the sun, also a star. Just as each star burns bright, so do each of my children. Step out of any darkness and embrace the loving light. Know I am with you always. May you feel my resounding love and grace. And so it is, my child. Mata.
Thank you. So let's hold sacred everything that was shared today in your In your small groups and in our full circle, deeply personal and yet also universal, as you have discovered. Keep it in a safe place in your being. Safeguard it like the treasure that it is. So as you settle into your seat, reconnecting with our Mother, the Earth, through the base of your spine, and drawing on the ancestral wisdom available to you through every pore of your body, the channel of light that connects you to the unseen world. Breathing, showing up, giving yourself permission to be right here in this body on this day. I'll begin with reading a poem by Ellen Bass called "The Thing Is." To love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, and everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, your throat filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief, you think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms, a plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. Yes, I will take you. I will love you again. Good Bones by Maggie Smith. Life is short, though I keep this from my children. Life is short, and I've shortened mine in 1,000 delicious, ill-advised ways. 1,000 deliciously ill-advised ways I'll keep from my children. The world is at least 50% terrible, and that's a conservative estimate, though I keep this from my children. For every bird, there is a stone thrown at a bird. For every loved child, a child broken, bagged, sunk in a lake. Life is short, and the world is at least half terrible, and for every kind of stranger, there is one who would break you, though I keep this from my children. I am trying to sell them the world. Any decent realtor walking you through a real shithole chirps on about good bones. This place could be beautiful, right? You could make this place beautiful. Good Bones by Maggie Smith. There was a different quality to the meditation just now than there was this morning, a deeper sense of silence, right? I don't know if it's because you're exhausted, or if we've just sunk into a kind of aquifer of stillness, maybe a little bit of both. Begin by reading a prayer from this book, Mother of God, Similar to Fire. This is a book that I did with an iconographer who happens to be a Roman Catholic priest writing icons in a kind of classic Eastern Orthodox way, but with some real twists, like a lot of unusual interpretations. There's one of the Black Madonna that's actually an African woman holding her baby, you know, that kind of thing. And so my beloved friend, Father Bill, invited me, this is a good one, Our Lady of the Apocalypse. He invited me to create a prayer for each one of these 51 icons of Mother Mary in a, he hoped, a more universal way, knowing me, which he did and does. And so I did. And I'm going to read you one now that I think may address better than anything else I could say where I'd like to go next. So this is called Mother of God, She Who Hears the Cries of the World, which is another name for Kuan Yin in the Chinese Buddhist tradition. She who hears the cries of the world. And Tara in the Tibetan tradition, who has eyes on the palms of her hand to see in all directions and ears in all directions to hear the cries of the world and respond. So take this as a prayer, as an offering, my offering of prayer to you. Mother of mercy, the cries of the world keep me awake at night. I rise from my bed, but I cannot locate the source of the wailing. It is everywhere, Mother, coming from all directions, and my heart is shattered by the sheer intensity of suffering. You of boundless compassion, expand my heart so that I can contain the pain. Focus my mind so that I can arrive at viable solutions. And energize my body so that I can engage in effective action. Give me the courage to follow the crumbs of heartbreak all the way home to the place where I can be of real service. Let me dip my fingers into the dew of your compassion and scatter it now over the fevered brow of this world. Amen. So, many of us are feeling the pain of the world in our hearts and in the cells of our own bodies. This is not a problem. I mean, it doesn't feel good, and the world is definitely burning. You're right about that. And yet our response of heartbreak is the opening to the healing of the world. To armor ourselves against the pain of the world is to disengage from any possibility of transforming those toxins, transmuting those poisons into the gold of a deeper, richer, fuller humanity who knows how to care for and steward our beloved Mother, the Earth, and our human and animal communities. That heartbreak is necessary for an authentic response that will actually shift things. And it is true that conditions have unfolded to the point where there is no turning back to the way things were. And all hands will be needed on deck to help guide what is to come, and perhaps to midwife some of the death that is going to unfold, whether it's actual deaths in our communities or simply the ending of ways that we have grown accustomed to having things be and to doing things, that those structures are crumbling and those institutions are dying. And in that dying, our fearless, loving presence will be a great gift. So whether we get to save this sinking ship or become loving companions for the changes to come, doing this inner work and resourcing ourselves and cultivating our access points to those well springs of vitality and goodness and wisdom that we're all practicing are vitally needed. You know this already. In Judaism, in mystical Judaism, this process of tending the inner so that we can serve the outer, even that duality is a false dichotomy, is called tikkun olam. Tikkun means repair. And olam, as we learned earlier with olam haba and Shabbat, a taste of the world to come, olam is world. So tikkun olam, the repair of the world, is the task that is given, or the invitation that is offered, let's put it that way, more feminine terms, to all of us, that we all have a hand in this repairing of the world. Luckily, it's not up to us individually. We can only do it together. Tikkun olam, the rabbis didn't tell us this, but guess what? I'm going to tell you, is a joint venture. It is a communal call and a collective response that is required to mend the broken world. And it says in Judaism that we do that repair or mending of the tapestry, the torn fabric of this world, with every act of loving kindness. Chesed, in Hebrew, chesed, loving kindness. And every act of tzedakah, which is generosity. I have felt today in this circle such generosity of spirit. It's so palpable and strong in this gathering. Your beautiful, generous, abundant hearts. That's tikkun olam, what you're doing with each other, with me, and undoubtedly in the world. Not every minute. I mean, I know how life is. I know what it's like to be married and have children and all those, waking up to those people who annoy the shit out of you sometimes. Like that's, it doesn't mean that you're not being an active participant in the mending of the world, because sometimes you wake up in a bad mood. So please give yourselves a break for being the human beings that you're meant to be. And yet it says in mystical Judaism that we are imprinted. The day we are born, our souls are imprinted with what is exactly ours to do to heal the world. And that we are perfectly equipped to do it. It sometimes takes us a minute to figure it out, to find it. Well, not figure it out. Like Teresa said, the important thing is not to think much, but to love much. Hint, hint. Finding what is yours to do to mend the world is going to have something to do with love. Not with what you think you should be doing. And most of us are reluctant prophets. If you're feeling a little sense of, oh my God, not me, pick someone else, you're in good company. From Moses to Muhammad to little Mother Mary, who was 14 years old or something, when the angel Gabriel appeared to her and said, you are the one to be the vessel to receive the Prince of Peace, love incarnate. Who, me? Are you kidding? I'm an unwed, pregnant teenager in the Roman Empire, poor. You must have me mixed up with somebody who's worthy. Yes, you. You are the most worthy being in the universe, said the angel Gabriel. And you are the most worthy being in the universe to be the vessel for the inflowing of love in this world. And of course you're going to be reluctant. It's baked into the cake, that reluctance. In fact, if you weren't, I wouldn't trust you. Some of you know those people who are like, pick me. I've got it all together. I know the way. Stay away. There was some great quote like, I love the company of people who seek the truth, but keep me from the people who think they found it. Something like that, right? So, trust that ambivalence. Trust that feeling of vulnerability. Trust the holiness of not knowing. As we step up now to the call that is resounding through the universe, that comes with pain. It comes with pain. The cries of the world are unbearable, and yet we bear it. And we bear it with love and with some measure, please, of joy. So when we're looking for that which is ours to do, to respond, it's probably hidden in plain sight in the midst of something that you already love and that you're already good at and that you enjoy, that fills you. So for me, it was writing. I didn't realize for years that my writing was anything other than some kind of self-indulgence. Or painting a pretty picture with words. And it took me a long time and some really kick-ass activists to convince me that my writing was my tikkun olam, was my activism, was my way of stepping up to the call. Because through words you can convey some things that need to be said. So yours it may be something in the arts. Also, I consider writing to be an art, but some other form of art. We saw with David's offering today how his gift for mime and for performing these essential truths changed us. I will be forever changed by observing and receiving that offering. That's his activism. That's his tikkun olam. So I don't know what yours is. You may be already hard at work doing it and offering it every day. It may be yet to form for you, but my prayer for you is that you trust yourself and be kind to yourself as you search for that inner blueprint that is your birthright for responding in your special way, together with other special beings, to the cries of the world. In Judaism, it's said that the way this all happened was that the Holy One wanted to know its holy self. This is a cosmological story. This was put down by, taken from the universe and put down by Rabbi Isaac Luria in the 16th century, Kabbalist in Spain. I think, where's its Tzfat? Anyway, the legend is that when the Holy One wished to know its holy self, it poured itself into containers. Actually, it was very much like the Big Bang. They collected all of its energy into and collapsed it into a dense mass. This was long before the Big Bang Theory. And the radiance of the divine was too powerful, and these vessels into which it poured itself exploded, shattered. And the shards of light and shards of darkness went scattering in all directions, and that created all that is, from the unity, Ein Sof, to the multiplicity of all that is. And then humans were created to restore those vessels to wholeness, to mend the broken world, and to reunify the Godhead. So Shabbat is part of that, is welcoming the Shekhinah so that the feminine and masculine that live inside all of us come back into balance. So however we can lift up those shards, it says, gather them and lift them up, we do it. And it changes. There are different times in our lives when one form of tikkun olam is what's happening, and then later it may change completely, and be willing to allow that change to unfold. So, the reluctant prophet, tikkun olam, the heartbreak that we carry for what's going on in this world. I also carry personally, and I know some of you do as well, great hope. Because at the grassroots level, so many wonderful things are happening. People are waking up and they're reaching out to each other in love and in kindness and in creativity. Wildly creative things are happening, and subversive things. And people are overturning and disrupting the established ways of doing things, these structures and institutions that have caused pain, have perpetuated marginalization and suffering. We're throwing it over. We're turning over those tables. And we're doing it together. So it looks pretty grim on the news, I know, and the climate is broken. And there are some horrifying things going on all over the planet. And the level of hope and excitement and connectedness that is also unfolding in all the places that matter in these small sacred spaces like this one today are changing everything. Please believe that. And that you can't do it alone, so don't worry about it. It's not up to you. It's up to us. And yes, let your heart break and break open. That's when the real healing can begin. So I'd like to end this teaching with reading you the Bodhisattva vow from the Buddhist tradition. And then we'll open it up for some questions and responses. Actually, first I want to give you a word in Hebrew that I love. And the word is hineni. Hineni, Hineyni. Hineni. Which means, anyone? Here I am. Here I am. It's what all the prophets, the biblical prophets and the prophets of every tradition in their own language say when the call comes, but they don't say it right away. First they say, I think you have me mixed up with someone else, or pick someone else, or some other form of no way, not me. I'm not thin enough or rich enough or whatever our excuses are to step up to this call. Maybe later. And then, after we sit with our reluctance for a while, often, if we can just allow ourselves to be in that dark night and abide there for a bit, we will find bubbling up a very soft at first, hineni. All right, use me. What did Mary say in the Gospels? I will be your handmaiden, a vessel for this great incarnation of love in the world. She didn't say it that way, but I'm a translator, I get to translate. Hineni, she said, here I am. Moses at the burning bush had to be called 3 times. Moses, Moses, Moses. Take off your sandals. You are standing on holy ground. This is a holy moment when we are being called, all of us, to step up. And our invitation is to embody that hineni. Here I am. Let me be of use. Let me be an instrument, as Francis says, of your peace. Make me an instrument of your peace. I may not feel worthy or well-resourced enough to be a resource to others, but hineni, here I am. We can do it together. That's the thing. The Divine Mother is my girl. I have found, I didn't pay any attention to her for a very long time, a little bit in chanting the Kali and Durga, but now I know that when I have to do a hard thing, an impossible thing, I can call on her and she will do it with me. So even if you have to pretend, fake it till you make it. Call on her and call on each other, which is the same thing. All right. So the original Bodhisattva prayer for humanity was written in the 8th century by Shantideva, the Indian sage. And this is, again, like we spoke about at the opening of this day, that this is a vow, the Bodhisattva vow, but it's also an invitation of love. So the Bodhisattva is the one who, on the brink of enlightenment, says, actually, I think I'll stay here until all my friends are free, too. The Bodhisattva opts not to merge into undifferentiated field of love, but to embody love in the world until every sentient being is liberated, every last blade of grass. And so when you become a Buddhist, as some of you have done, often, at least in the Mahayana tradition, this vow is offered. So I'm going to read it to you, and I invite you to take it in and see if you can make of it an offering in your own heart. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. I'm going to read it again. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened. And the Zen version, so from Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Roshi Joan Halifax. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. And finally, I would like to read you the refuge vow, taking refuge in the 3 jewels or the triple gem, written by Lama Cynthia George, an American Tibetan Buddhist Lama, or an American Lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, who does the earth treasure vase practice that I write about in Wild Mercy, that some of you have heard about. Perfection of wisdom, mother of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, and all beings, nourishing, holding, and healing all. Great Mother Earth, precious jewel of the cosmos, to you we bow in gratitude. We take refuge in the earth as our teacher, the one who shows us the way in this life. We take refuge in the earth as an expression of the Dharma, the teachings of interbeing, understanding, and love. We take refuge in the earth as an embodiment of the Sangha, the vast interdependent community of life in balance and harmony. Living within the web of life on earth, we dedicate ourselves to embodying awakened awareness on the path of healing in service of all beings. We dedicate our lives to realizing our oneness with Gaia. We take refuge in the earth as our teacher, the one who shows us the way in this life. We take refuge in the earth as an expression of the Dharma, the teachings of interbeing, understanding, and love. We take refuge in the earth as an embodiment of the Sangha, the vast interdependent community of life in balance and harmony. And so if we can make this vow today to step up, to show up, to embody love in this world, and also recommit to our own dear selves to find refuge where we can, to take refuge, to take rest, to refill our cup from those bountiful well springs of wisdom across the world's great spiritual traditions, and particularly right now as expressed in feminine form. All will be well, and all will be well, and every kind of thing shall be well. As who said? Anyone? Julian of Norwich. All will be well, and all will be well, and every kind of thing shall be well. And Julian, at the end of her showings of her book, you know, that's her very famous saying, but at the end she says, we will realize that it has been well all along. So let's take a few minutes to, someone just sent me a picture of my mother-in-law in her dying process, surrounded by her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. I haven't looked at it yet, but it says what the caption says. We'll look at it together after. So I'd like to open it up now. Oh, I was going to say that I have a friend coming to pick me up. Some of you may know her, so she may come in at some point to fetch me. Because I think that she might be here. So I'd like to take about 10 or 15 minutes. Feel free to stand, stretch, do what you need to do, and I will take questions, and I will try to remember for the sake of the recording to repeat them. Yes?
I'm
Dave.
wondering what you think about the sort of collective symbolism of the fire that occurred at Notre Dame Cathedral. I'm very interested in that in terms of how it relates to maybe an incarnation of the divine feminine, and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to respond in my own way versus some of the things I've read and heard other people say about the symbolism of the burning of Notre Dame. I mean, Our Lady, the Church of Our Lady, the symbol of Mother Mary in the Western world in many ways was that cathedral. The white Mary and the white church and the white version of the Mother. And this is what's coming now. She's, yeah. Are you sure you want me to say that? That the dark Madonna is what's rising again now. And that's what's breaking open the existing structures, and she's pouring out and rising up, and she's wild, and she's and she's unpredictable, and she's a troublemaker. And so I don't know what the burning of Notre Dame symbolizes, but what I do know is those white Western structures are in the collective psyche are what are crumbling and burning right now, and the dark mother is the one who is revealing herself, and it's not always pretty. So thanks for your question. Yes.
I was wanting you to comment on the differentiation between longing and striving.
Oh, what a beautiful question. The question is the differentiation between, or if I can make a distinction between longing and striving. That's such a delicious question, because the yearning, I feel, is our birthright. It's a gift. It's an alchemical fire that melts the boundaries that keep us from union. And I don't mean union only in some transcendent way, but union with all that is, taking our rightful place in the web of interbeing to which we belong, that we often forget about when we have these crusty external boundaries. So the yearning itself softens the heart and allows us to flow into each other in a way. Striving, and so I feel like that yearning is the embodiment of that feminine impulse that we've been speaking about all day. Striving is more of the vow part of the bodhisattva vow, or the commandment part of the mitzvah. You know, it's the part that says you shall do this and you will do that, and if you're and you need to muscle your way to enlightenment. That's a very masculine paradigm that all of us have inherited, women, men, and people of all genders, that somehow we have to merit our way, we have to deserve awakening, we have to prove ourselves worthy of receiving divine love, and we have to work as hard as we can, so that it's like that poem I read by Christine Lohr Weber that says that we've inherited this model of perfection and purification that of course implies that we are impure and imperfect. And there's something about reclaiming the messy suchness of who we are, exactly what we bring to the table, as being the thing that is most needed, and the holy ground of exactly what is. And so striving would be, I mean, there's a certain kind of robust showing up that is required. There are certain spiritual muscles that need to be conditioned to face what's happening right now, to be able to step up and show up in the ways that we're being called to do. So I'm not speaking about the feminine as some kind of lazy, unfettered, amorphous, mushy thing. I'm talking about a rigorous, fierce response of the heart. So thank you for your question. Yes.
Did you use the word that it softens the heart, it melts the fire, like the fire, it has to be robust on some level to melt the fires that are coming at us, and yet it does it in a way that doesn't feel as if I'm gonna die at every moment.
Right.
If I don't do this, if I don't do that, if I don't seek this, if I don't seek that.
That's right.
I am so fucking tired of that.
Right. It's not punishing. It's not a punishing energy. It's a...
And I actually use that word, how fucking tired of it.
Yeah.
In a robust way.
Yeah.
Almost from the strong feminine.
I hear you. Yes, that's the fierce feminine saying enough already. Yeah.
And that fierceness is where I have stepped into, I've lost, I'm stepping in again, as opposed to this male way of doing, or patriarchal, or striving, or I gotta do it this way, because it's just like it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It hurts. It hurts. It's almost like I'm hurting myself in it.
Yeah. Well said. Beautiful. It's like we do the practices that we have received, these gifts from all across the landscape of the world's spiritual traditions. We live in an age where we have access to these treasures. And it's not like we get to just help ourselves as privileged white Western people to just the cultural treasures of other peoples. We need to do so with respect and with deep listening. And we do live in an age where, just as there's incredible emergency medicine available to us, we have access to resources that we haven't always. And we don't have to stay in our little silos. If our hearts kind of spontaneously, as mine does, and I think many of you, respond to the wisdom, to the presence of the sacred in multiple holy houses, right? So we can engage those wisdom traditions with discernment and with depth and profound rigor. At the same time that what we're doing is we're opening our hearts and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable so that we can actually be changed by our encounter with these great wisdom streams. That we're not just like dilettantes, taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that, purchasing it and using it, and then discarding it in this throwaway culture, but rather we are allowing ourselves to become naked enough that through our encounter with these seemingly other spiritual technologies and resources, we are allowing ourselves to become remade so that we can be of use in this world in ways that maybe we haven't felt we were able to before. And we're doing so not to prove something to ourselves or anyone else, like I'm spiritual enough to withstand this pain that I might be experiencing, a pain of a personal loss or of our political outrage, but rather as an act of love. So that for me, for instance, some mindfulness practice, all the years and years of sitting in silence so that I could be with what is inside myself, that great battlefield in there, is not just to kind of be able to endure the things that arise that challenge me most, but so that I can keep my heart open in hell, as Ram Dass says, my friend Ram Dass, keeping your heart open in hell. It's what Kuan Yin did when she descended like Jesus into the underworld after she died, after she was executed, actually, by her father, but that's another story in the book. She went into the hell realms and sang to the people to the souls who were suffering there. That was an act of love. She wasn't trying to prove how spiritual she was. Her heart naturally, because she was Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, open to all suffering beings, so much so that she not only was willing but couldn't help herself but descend into the places where the suffering was the greatest and sing to those who suffered. So sing your love song to the suffering.
You live in New Mexico.
Yeah.
Have you studied, have you written about Native American?
Okay, that's a great question. So being from New Mexico, have I studied and written about Native American spirituality? Okay, so by the way, yes, I have studied, and yes, I have investigated all the things that I write about. What's important to me is have I lived it in some way in the cells of my body and in my own spiritual life, the teachings that I write about. And I am reluctant, of all the spiritual traditions that I draw from, I am most reluctant to do that with indigenous wisdom traditions, because they have been so colonized and so taken advantage of by the Western world. I mean, we started this day by acknowledging that we're sitting on land that was stolen from the original people who lived here. And so I use the most discernment with Native and indigenous traditions and write the least about them, even though I grew up in Taos, New Mexico, where the Taos Pueblo people are, not hidden away on reservations. I mean, the Taos Pueblo is the oldest continuously inhabited an indigenous community in North America. And you've probably seen pictures of the multi-storied adobe complex. And people live without running water and electricity on Taos Pueblo the way they have for a couple of thousand years at least that we know of. And it's a huge influence on my life, but it's the place where I retain observer status the most for political reasons. Yes.
Can you talk about prayer some? I love praying, I'm so connected to prayer. For some time I resisted it because I was resisting organized religion and I felt like it was like begging the divine for favors or something.
Yeah.
So I've evolved that understanding, but it speaks to me so much. I would love to just hear your thoughts.
So prayer is something that you once rejected, but now you embody
and I feel like
embrace it.
I love it. It's like a longing, receiving, a connection. So just love to hear.
Right.
your thoughts about it.
Not asking some dude for favors.
No. No. Not asking somebody for favors.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say about prayer is that for me it's about reclaiming that love longing that we spoke about earlier in this day. That when I set aside time, as Santa Teresa de Avila said, to just be with the beloved, that is precious time where automatically I'm in communion, I'm in relationship. And it requires kind of a sacred intention to actually set aside that time to be with the friend. That's the other way that she puts it. She says that contemplative prayer is nothing other than a loving conversation with the friend. So there's contemplative prayer, and then there's more formalized prayers, and I both are part of my life. I would say contemplative prayer mimics mindfulness meditation practice with the added element of devotion, of love. And then there are prayers to begin important things like a meal or Shabbat. And I draw from prayers in multiple languages that I've been given to learn. Prayers in Hebrew and Arabic and Sanskrit and Tibetan. And it deeply enriches my life. But, again, my friend Ramdas we were talking about fake it till you make it, He tells a story about someone who once said to him, recently actually, so you talk to your guru, and who died in the 1970s? And Ramdas says, yes, I do. I talk to him all the time. And he said, so you actually think there's this dead guy that is hearing you talk to him and answering you? And isn't that just in your imagination? And Ramdas said, of course it's in my imagination. My imagination is this sacred gift that's been given to me so that I can talk to my guru and he can talk back to me. So it's magical thinking, whatever. If it opens your heart and connects you with the divine, thank you very much. All right, one more question or distilled reflection before we do our closing. Anything bubbling up? Yes.
Mirabai, with all your travels and all your talks, if you had to give us, what's just a recurring theme? Like, if you could only impart one sentence to us. I like the Cliff Notes things. I'm very lazy. What would be the headline? You know what I'm saying? For all of us to help heal ourselves and each other.
Well, since my area of interest is the world's religions, I would say that there are treasures buried at the heart of all the world's great wisdom traditions. And it's time to reclaim them, and they are feminine wisdom teachings. They're the women mystics, and they're the teachings of loving kindness and fierce truth-telling that are going to overturn everything if we acknowledge them and reclaim them and bring them back. It's going to be a big old beautiful mess, but it's time. Thank you. So, I'm going to read you one last poem. Have you enjoyed the poetry?
Yes. You can get all those, right?
Yeah, there's a list in your packet. And not the poems themselves, but just the titles, and it's why God made Google. It was very generous of her. Monet refuses the operation by Liesel Muller. Doctor, you say there are no halos around the streetlights in Paris, and what I see is an aberration caused by old age, an affliction. I tell you, it has taken me all my life to arrive at the vision of gas lamps as angels, to soften and blur and finally banish the edges you regret I don't see, to learn that the line I called the horizon does not exist, and sky and water, so long apart, are the same state of being. 54 years before I could see the cathedral is built of parallel shafts of sun. And now you want to restore my youthful errors? Fixed notions of top and bottom, the illusion of three-dimensional space, wisteria separate from the bridge it covers. What can I say to convince you? The Houses of Parliament dissolve night after night to become the fluid dream of the Thames. I will not return to a universe of objects that don't know each other, as if islands were not the lost children of one great continent. The world is flux, and light becomes what it touches, becomes water, lilies on water, above and below water, becomes lilac and mauve and yellow and white and cerulean lamps, small fists passing sunlight so quickly to one another that it would take long streaming hair inside my brush to catch it. To paint the speed of light, our weighted shapes, these verticals, burn to mix with air and change our bones, skin, clothes to gases. Doctor, if only you could see how heaven pulls earth into its arms and how infinitely the heart expands to claim this world, blue vapor without end. So, my friends, I am going to invite you as we close to do something that was given to me as a transmission by Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, a beautiful 20th and 21st century rabbi who kind of was the architect of the Jewish renewal movement, which is very much an interfaith, interspiritual community that's also deeply rooted in the feminine. Shortly before he died, I was with a group of contemplative activists, bless you, at Naropa University with Zalman in Boulder. And he said the time of the rabbis and the priests and the imams blessing the poor slobs below them is over. Well, I don't remember how he said it, but that time is over. And blessing is something that belongs to all of us. That we all not only have the right to be a source of blessing to each other, but We must bless each other at every opportunity. So the words are, while you are away from your people, we do pray that on your journey you will find balance in your heart and mind. And it's a little song, a little ditty. So I need my singers again, as soon as you learn it, to join in. And we'll sing it a few times to each other. In fact, let's stand up and kind of mush together a little bit. We'll get as circular as we can. And we can have layers, that's okay. Yeah, finally Nancy's happy.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to even be one circle, it can be several. While you are away from your people, we do pray that on your journey you will find balance in your heart and mind. While you are away from your people, we do pray that on your journey you will find balance in your heart and mind. While you are away from your people, we do pray that on your journey you will find balance in your heart and mind. Well done, one more. While you are away from your people, we do pray that on your journey you will find balance in your heart and mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Much love.
Thank you.